So hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Hebert, Director of Communications here at SAANYS, and I welcome you to the second session in our summer series with our partners at New York State ASCD. Today's session will focus on the topic of how educators can leverage relationships to improve practice. Now, before we begin, we will hear a brief word from our sponsor, Edgenuity.
With a full online suite of rigorous K-12 curriculum, innovative instructional services, and supplemental solutions, Edgenuity is dedicated to student-driven success. We address diverse student needs, including intervention, core curriculum, advanced placement, electives, credit recovery, CTE, and social-emotional learning. We're changing the course of education for over 4 million students every day. Edgenuity, where learning.
All right, thank you, Edgenuity. And do we have Bonnie with us this morning? Bonnie, there you are. I just want to take a quick minute to introduce my colleague, Bonnie Tryon. She is the coordinator of the SAANYS Mentor Coach Program. Just wants to give you a little 30-second overview of that before we get going. Bonnie?
Thanks, Michelle. Yes, and if any of you are interested in more conversation, I will be putting my email address in the chat. SAANYS has offered for well over a decade a really high quality mentor coaching program. If you need a soft place to land, you need a discussion with a trusted colleague, this is the place to go. And if you need CTLE credit or your mentoring or to complete your SED mentor requirement for certification, we're here for you. There can't be a better time to have someone by your side in a confidential way. So thanks, Michelle. I'll turn it back over to you. And please, by all means, send me an email. I'll be glad to send you further information or have a one-to-one conversation with how we might best be able to meet you and your district's need for mentoring and coaching. Thanks.
Thanks, Bonnie. And you'll find a lot more information about the SAANYS Mentor Coaching Program on our website. And during the program, I'll throw that in the chat room so you can all access that at your convenience. So as we begin, please remain in mute mode. And we'll use the chat room throughout the session, unless, of course, when we're in breakout rooms, which we will be using today, or if you just want to join in the conversation. But in general, we'll stay muted until we're ready to speak up. And then also, I just do want to let you know that the session is being recorded, and that session will be the recording of the session will be available to participants in probably by the end of the day or tomorrow. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Larrison of New York State ASCD to get us started. Eric.
Thank you, Michelle. Again, my name is Eric Larrison. I'm the Executive Director for New York State ASCD. That's the New York State Association for the Supervision of Curriculum Development. We're an affiliate of the international organization many of you are familiar with, known as ASCD. And New York State ASCD has been serving the educators across New York State since 1947 to support educators in their professional learning with professional learning opportunities, as well as our research journal, Impact, which is published twice a year. For more information about our organization, and I'll put this link in the chat, but for more information about our organization, you can go to our website, where currently we're featuring the last 2 issues of Impact free to the public. That website address again is NYSASCD.org. Over the last 3 months, we have closely worked with our partners at the School Administrators Association of New York State, that's SAANYS, in putting together this 3-part summer series called Rebuilding Calls for Some New Tools. Both New York State ASCD and SAANYS have worked to identify and include in this series the best information that ASCD has to offer to help you in your planning and your work during these unprecedented times. Each of the 3 sessions includes experts in their fields and the recently published book by ASCD. So if you'd like to obtain a copy of each ebook at a discount, you can contact me. And again, I'll put my email address in the chat, and there'll be more information about this later on today. Facilitating today's session along with me is Matt Youngins, who is a principal in Clarkstown, New York. He's a SAANYS member, as well as a member of our board of directors. Today's session is titled Today's session is titled Forces of Influence, How Educators Can Leverage Relationships to Improve Practice. And it's presented by the book's authors, Fred Endy and Megan Everett. Fred Endy is the Director of Curriculum and Instructional Services for the Putnam Northern Westchester Board of Cooperative Educational Services. He previously served in the same organization as the Regional Science Coordinator and Director of Science 21. Before that, he worked for 10 years as a middle school science teacher and department chair in Chappaqua, New York. He is one of ASCD's emerging leaders and currently is on the board of ASCD's Emerging Leader Affiliate. He has written and reviewed manuscripts for the National Science Teachers Association and ASCD, and has been both a national and regional presenter for both organizations. Matt?
Thanks, Eric. Good morning, everybody. My pleasure today to introduce Megan Everett. Megan is currently serving as a full-time school ambassador fellow at the U.S. Department of Education. She's an elementary mathematics coach in Salt Lake City and the executive director of the ASCD Emerging Leader Alumni Affiliate. Megan previously taught first, third, and fourth grades and is proud to have taught at George Hall, the National Turnaround Model School. Megan was named the 2013 Alabama Elementary Teacher of the Year and a 2015 to 2017 Hope Street Group National Teacher Fellow. She co-designed Powered by Teach to Lead Utah and spent 6 years as a blogger for Scholastic, sharing classroom practices on everything from curriculum design to classroom libraries. She is the Utah ASCD president and has been a Digital Promise micro-credential leader, serving on the CCSSO Teacher Recruitment and Retention Educator Steering Committee. Megan co-authored today's book, Forces of Influence, How Educators Can Leverage Relationships to Improve Practice from ASCD. She's currently pursuing her doctorate in Teacher, Society, and Schools from the University of Florida, and her dissertation topic focuses on how mass communication theory can be applied to improve school communication. So thanks to Fred and Megan for joining us today, and we'd kick off the session now.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Eric. And thank you to SAANYS and New York State ASCD for this opportunity. And thanks to all of you for being here on an early August day. Megan and I were just saying how where she is out in Utah, people are going back to school. And here we've got another month, right? So hope that you're enjoying your summer wherever you are. So welcome. As Eric shared, our session today takes a look at elements of relationships and relationship building. And it's work that Megan and I have spent a lot of time on in our careers, and certainly what you've spent a lot of time in your careers on too. And our work in this book has come in particularly valuable over the course of the last year and a half. And so we want to share a little bit of what we've learned and some ideas and thoughts with all of you over the course of our time together. So Megan, if you don't mind moving on, thank you. So you heard a little bit about us. We won't rehash that, but I will share that our contact information is provided for you there, email and Twitter handles. And we hope that you'll reach out and chat and ask questions, and we'll make sure we save some time for some Q&A today too. So you can hop on, thanks. So we're gonna get started actually with a bit of an engagement for all of you using a tool that we've likely become increasingly familiar with called Jamboard. In a second, for those of you who aren't familiar with using the tool, I'll give you kind of like the 30-second update. But what we're gonna ask you to do in a moment, our SAANYS friends, Michelle will be really kind to create a number of breakout rooms shortly. And what we're gonna have you do is go to a Jamboard that matches your breakout room. I'm actually gonna pop the links into the chat shortly. They're the same links that came in the email you got from Christine with this Zoom link to join our session. And we're going to ask you to take a couple minutes to use the Jamboard to list ingredients that you think are important to build successful relationships. Jamboard is really pretty easy to use. So you'll go to the link, and as Megan's just done, you'll click on the sticky note tab on the left. That's the fourth button down that looks like a sticky note. And you'll just type anything into that little box that pops up. You know, you'll list relationship ingredients. You can move them, reshift them, change their size, etc. but we want you to take the first 5 minutes or so, just taking some eye time. You're going to do it just to give yourself a couple minutes to list ingredients. You'll paste them or place them onto your Jamboard. And then we're going to ask you to take 3 or 4 minutes with the other educators who are in your breakout room and talk about some of the commonalities that you see. So it's really going to be a couple steps of a process. In a moment, Michelle will open our breakout rooms. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take the links for all the different breakout rooms, and I'm going to paste them into the chat. And so that way, before you go to your breakout room, you can click on the link for your room. And I think, Michelle, how many rooms are you going to create?
Well, right now, if I create 8 rooms, we'll have 4 to 5 in each room.
Perfect.
Okay.
So I'm going to paste all of those 8 links into the chat right now. And so when you get your room assignment, you'll click on the link that matches, and then you'll go into that Jamboard, take about 4 or 5 minutes to list some ingredients, and then another 3 or 4 minutes to chat with your breakout room colleagues about some of the commonalities you see. And then we'll bring you back probably about 7, 8, 9 minutes or so. Okay. So we'll see you shortly.
All right, here we go.
Welcome back. And apologies on the sharing. I'm glad that we got them all open. Sometimes you think sometimes you think you said it right, and par for the course. So thanks for your patience, and appreciate you taking the time to think and chat a little bit. So Megan, we'll turn over to you.
It would help if I'm unmuted. So we're going to take a little look at the why. So, in our book, Fred and I really ground everything that we do in relationships. And so we need to think about why relationships are so important. And one of the things that's really interesting from research is that we are social creatures. And I think this past year has proved that, right? We crave being around each other. And you actually have more longevity if you have healthy relationships. And not just that, not just that there are these health benefits, you have lower blood pressure, all of these things. There's other reasons that we need to focus in on relationships. So one of the things we know about organizations is that effective decision-making happens when we have varied viewpoints, when we get perspectives from different groups and different organizations. And if we have a teacher voice and an admin voice working together, they're coming at it from 2 different ways, and that helps. Another thing is there are only 24 hours in the day, and you can't get it all done on your own, right? And so we have to rely on a team. I mean, and schools are great little microcosms of society that, the principal, as great as they are, cannot be in every room every time, right? They have to rely on that larger network. And honestly, it's just not optional. There are very, very few instances in this world where you might be able to live in a bubble and not work with others or not have to form some kind of relationship. But generally, if you are working, and certainly if you're in education, this has to get done. Oh, and then it's about our wants and needs. So, and Fred's going to speak a little bit more to this, but we want something from relationships, and that's not necessarily bad. You might want something as simple as love and affection and attention. We crave those things, but you also form these relationships because you need to get something done. And so Fred's going to talk a little bit more about the different kinds of relationships we form.
So I know the image on here looks scary, right? It's like the taking over the other person, but understanding that relationships are transactional isn't a bad thing, right? And I think that as Megan and I were putting the book together and thinking about our own experiences, it took a little bit of work to come to that realization, because particularly in education, we never want to see ourselves as manipulative in any way, right? And so when you think about relationships being transactional, it's fair to worry that that's in fact what's happening. But if intentions are good And if success for all learners is what we have behind all the work that we do, then recognizing that we engage in relationships because we want something to happen or need something to happen makes perfect sense. And so Adam Grant, he's a psychologist out of the University of Pennsylvania. You can find him quite a bit writing op-eds in the New York Times and other media outlets, and he's put together a bunch of great TED Talks. He talks a lot about the transactional nature of relationships and the roles that we take within relationships. And he boils it down pretty simply. He says that in any given relationship at a present time, we're serving as either a giver, right? We're looking to share, whether it's knowledge, whether it's love, whether it's something tangible with somebody. We're a taker, right? Where we're receiving whatever the other person or people are giving, or we're a wanderer. We're not quite sure yet where the relationship is going to go, and therefore we don't know what role we'll play at any given time. And so if you don't mind, thanks, Megan. So we're going to ask you to do a little bit of a role and relationship self-assessment. And I'm going to pop a worksheet into the chat, and thanks for pulling it up, Megan, on screen. This was a resource that Megan and I put together as part of our work on this book. And so I'm going to put the link in here. The link is going to come to you as a view only. So you can either just kind of take a look at it, or you can go to File, make a copy, and just save it in your own Google Drive. But this tool is a great tool to map out the roles you play in a given day and the actions you tend to take in that role. So we're going to ask you to take about 4 or 5 minutes, take some eye time, just do this individually, and think about a quote unquote normal day for you. And think about the roles you tend to live in. It could be, you could include just professional, just personal, a mix of both. And then we'd like you to think about or jot down some of the actions you tend to take in that role. The third column, we're going to have you leave blank for now, and we're going to come back to it in a couple minutes as we talk a little bit about the real foundation of the work that we did. So give yourselves about 4 or 5 minutes to brainstorm daily roles, actions you take in those roles. Again, feel free to jot them digitally or just on paper or notepad. And in about 4 minutes, we'll come back together and move on from there. So we hope that gave you a little bit of time to think about some roles that you occupy in a day, as well as some of what those roles look like for you. And Megan, over to you.
Okay, so one of the big things that Fred and I worked on was a matrix to kind of talk about the different roles, relationships, and what we term the 4 forces of influence that people are likely to use. So we're going to get you oriented to our matrix. So the first thing is to think about a horizontal line. You may want to jot this down on a piece of paper, but a horizontal line where the far left side is when you take on something new or you're involved in a decision, you like low initial involvement, or you tend to have low initial involvement. So you're somebody that likes to brainstorm, generate, get it all out on the table. That really speaks to you. It's a think aloud. Now, if you were on the far other side of that, you like a high initial involvement. So you're somebody that's going to plan and research and know every contingency before you speak up. You're going to come to that meeting with background or information. And so you probably don't fall on one extreme or the other. You're probably somewhere in between. So give yourself an idea of where do you feel most comfortable from left to right. Okay. Now we're going to look at a horizontal or a vertical line. Math coach. So at the very upper end of this vertical line, this is somebody who likes high ongoing involvement. So once a decision is made, you have a hard time letting go. This is me. You want to see it through. You want to be involved in all the steps. You don't maybe delegate as much. Versus low ongoing involvement down at the bottom end. This is somebody who is a master delegator, either because you're really comfortable with that or because your job necessitates it, right? So where do you fall on the high ongoing involvement to low ongoing involvement scale? And again, probably not on the extremes. And now once you find those 2 places, we're going to see where they intersect. And that is going to tell you what force you tend to operate in the most, or where you feel most comfortable. And so Fred and I have named these the pull, push, shove, and nudge. And we're going to go through and tell you some hallmarks and things about each one of these forces. So Fred, I think you are talking pull.
Thanks, Megan. So one of the things that you can take from the matrix is that the higher your involvement in any stage, whether it's getting a interaction started or seeing things through to the end, the more energy and time intensive it's going to be. And so polls are incredibly time and energy intensive forces. Interactions that involve polls require a whole bunch from us. And because of that, they're not interactions to engage in lightly. The amount of time and energy and effort it takes to bring a poll to fruition is big enough that it makes sense for us not to engage in more than 1 or 2 of these with the person or groups of people at a given time, right? And the reason for that is because you're actively investing energy to get the work started and then actively investing yourself to bring it through to fruition. So what's important to consider is that if you're going to engage in a poll, you want to make sure that the situation is such where you feel pretty confident that you can get to a successful outcome. And because you're involved throughout the entire process, this is going to be something that is going to really require you and those you are working with to be able to see the value, right? It requires a real collaborative commitment to whatever the work is that you're engaging on. Some good examples of polls. One great example is to think of any interaction you might engage in with a colleague where modeling is at play, right? So it might be a co-teaching situation, right? Where you and a colleague are actively working together to teach or explore a topic or idea with learners of any age, right? It might also be to take it out of like the direct school or classroom mix. Let's say that you have a colleague who has done amazing work during the pandemic and really should be sharing it with the region or state or nation at large, whatever it might be. But maybe this colleague is more introverted than you are. And so rather than just encouraging the person to put in a proposal at like a SAANYS event or a New York State ASCD event or whatever it might be, you decide to engage in the work with this person. So collaboratively together, you apply, you're accepted, you design, you facilitate, right? And so you're able to help get this educator's expertise out there by investing time and energy on your own. So you can move on, Megan. Thank you. It's a little bit different than a push. Now, one thing you'll see that is common between the two forces is they both require sustained involvement. It requires long-term energy on your part throughout the process. What's different is the amount of time and effort and energy that you invest to get the interaction started. In a push, you're really looking for the person or people to take the work on themselves initially. At the same time, you are committed to them that you will help and assist them as they move throughout their work. Pushes require less effort at the start, so they're often experiences that can be delegated. What's really important, though, is it's not a delegation without you following up or being involved. It's a delegation where you're going to be a support structure to that person or those educators who are engaged in the work. Great examples of pushes. I think a really easy one to think about is kind of like the student-teacher dynamic. So if you think back to your own student teaching days, if you had a really supportive cooperating teacher, what that cooperating teacher probably did really well was push you to take the lead in working with students, right? So that you were out there on your own, making mistakes and encouraging successes, but the cooperating teacher was there to provide support afterwards and throughout, right? Whether it was to celebrate those successes with you or to provide you with critical feedback. The key is that you weren't left alone, right? You knew in the background that you had that support. A non-work-related example, so here's one that's going on for me. My younger daughter is in day camp. She is at the stage now where she's learned to swim well enough that she can take like a deep water test, but she's kind of nervous to do that, right? So she has to make the decision to go and take that test on her own, knowing that her counselors will be there to support her if she needs assistance or to provide her with. So those are examples of how a push might exist in your normal life. Now, before we turn it over to Megan to explore the other two forces, what I'm going to ask you to do is take a look over your role sheet, okay? And take a look at that third column now, and look to see if there are any examples where you think a push or a pull comes into play in the actions that you tend to take in that role. And just kind of note or jot them down for where you think you use those forces in your work with other people in that role. So just give yourself like a minute to reflect on that. And then Megan will turn it over to you to talk about the shove and nudge.
Okay, so while you're thinking that through, we're going to go ahead and look at a shove. Now, a shove can sound rough, right? Like that sounds aggressive, and it's really not. I want you to reframe how you think about that, and that it's a now or never moment, right? People have a chance to prove their commitment, their practice, their cause, they're putting change to action. And there's a little time invested on the front, and there's little to no follow-up. But this becomes necessary a lot when you have to put things into action. And if you are in an administrative position, or if you're a parent, you're probably really familiar with this, right? We put the idea out there, may or may not have been my idea, and we say, yes, run with it. So these are really time sensitive. So when you need to get things done quickly, you're in a group where you're working on something, you decide who's going to do what, they take it, they run with it, you're in a shove situation. So maybe somebody's not holding up their end of the workload, and you speak with them and say, hey, this is on your shoulders now, and I need you to see it through. And then you're kind of stepping back from that. So you're not doing that side-by-side ongoing coaching. That's a shove situation. And I think, as a parent, I do this one all the time, right? I need you to get your room clean. Now it's on you to get your room clean. So we have shoved. And then a nudge is really interesting. So a nudge is kind of where Fred and I started our thinking about all of this. We said, where are these instances where you have some high initial involvement? You've got background, you've got ideas. Maybe you are a teacher that wants to influence the way that something is going on at your school, and you don't have that positional authority. And so you have this high initial involvement, but you're not going to be the person that gets to put their hands on how it goes long term. Right? So a nudge is a place where you can have some behind the scenes power. So it's really great if you want to affect some change, but maybe in a more subtle way, or maybe you don't have the opportunity to do it in an more aggressive way. So these are strategic steps that you're going to take. Some examples of how somebody might do this. So, if I want to influence the direction that we're going for a program selection, I might find some articles about best practices. I might grab some ed reports, right? And I drop them off, or I just make mention that they're available. I feel like a lot of times I will do this in my social media world, where I don't necessarily comment, I just kind of post some articles, right? And kind of let them go. Now, the flip side of that is you have to be okay with what the outcome is. If I'm dropping off articles or kind of sharing some information or some background with, say, my supervisor, and they decide to not go with it, it's subtle enough that I'm probably not going to get in trouble or get blowback, but at the same time, I'm probably not going to get credited with it, and they may not take that suggestion at all. So before we get into kind of thinking any further, take a look back again at that roles and relationships sheet and think, are there instances in which you shove? And are there instances in which you nudge? And are there places on there where you're finding those? Okay, so we are going to, I believe, head back into our same breakout rooms, and we're going to think about these couple of things. So when you look at your sheet, you probably have one that comes up more than others. I realize in doing this that I tend to have a lot of shoves and a lot of pulls. So think about which force are you using the most and why? How does that, what you've learned kind of here about those, shift your thinking about your original matrix placement? Maybe you thought you were a nudge and then you're going, oh, no, I'm not. And then how does this kind of help you? What if we all had this understanding in our toolkit when we're working with each other. And so we're going to put you into breakout rooms to just kind of have a little bit of a discussion about what you heard and how you find yourself working.
Okay, everyone, back in we go.
I think everyone is coming back, and we might have everybody at this point, so welcome back. So we hope it was a valuable conversation. You got to think a little bit and reflect on some of the forces you tend to utilize in your roles. I know I had a great conversation with one of our educators here just about some potential shifts in practice and how we can think about using the forces as some common language and also to kind of help move work forward. So what we'd like you to do is we're going to ask you just to do a quick bit of goal setting, and I'm going to paste a quick little goal setting worksheet into the chat. We've all heard of SMART goals. Megan and I like to think of short goals, and short goals are very similar to the ideas behind SMART goals. With a short goal, it's something real simple. It's a goal with a real positive outcome, and it's something that we can look at in an oncoming basis and be transformative, and also leads us to reflect. And so we put an example of one in here based on our conversation today. This week, I'll make an effort to do more pushing and less shoving by offering ongoing support to teachers when I give them ideas to try. And so in that, the link in the chat, it'll take you to a view-only doc. You can make a copy, or you can just jot on paper. And we'd love for you just to give yourself about a minute or two to reflect on what the sessions made you think about and what relationship and interaction goal you might set for yourself going forward. So take just a minute or so to do that. And then we're going to share a couple thoughts as a wrap up and then open it up for some questions. So hopefully you can think of some ways where you might use some of the ideas that we shared. Megan and I are happy to, we even put in a little short goal sheet. If you want to reach out with a goal you've set for yourself and want a little bit of a outside accountability partner, we're happy to reach out and check in to see if you were able to meet that goal you've set. Our contact information is here. You can send us an email, find us on Twitter. If you'd like to explore further and have ideas or engage in conversation about what we shared. And then if this is work that you find yourself leaning towards and you're thinking about the relationships you have with your teams and or your communities and thinking about how to shift processes, engage in some common language about the work you do, you can always feel free to reach out to SAANYS or New York State ASCD if you're interested in working further with us. So we would, before we do a quick wrap up from New York State ASCD and SAANYS, we just want to open it up to you for any questions that you have, either about some of the work we've done in this area and where our thinking led, or wonderings you have about application of some of these ideas.
Hey, Fred, it's Brian. It came up in our group about the idea of when you're thinking about the actions you need to take as a leader, to be thinking about which quadrant or bridges of quadrants you should be in prior to actually taking the steps, just to get an idea of what is it, what's our timeline, how do we got to get it done, who's available, and then the order of priority, and then be cognizant of that force that you want to apply.
So one thing I'll share, and then Megan, if you want to add anything to it, please do. There's a great visual that was created by Noster, and some of you may have seen it before. It's basically meant to help us identify why change doesn't happen. And I can search for it when I'm done chatting, but it's fantastic, right? And it just says, like, it's meant to be a bit of a pre-assessment, right, to engaging in work, because it gives you a sense of why things may not work the way you planned. And certainly you can use it after the fact too, but it's even better pre. I think, Brian, to your point, one of the things that's really valuable about thinking of these four forces in this way is, for me, before I engage in some targeted work, I can look at each of those four forces and think through what will happen if I lead in this way, right? What are going to be the end results if I nudge? What's going to happen if I tend to push? How would this change if I'm pulling people along? And then based on what I visualize, I can make a better decision as to what makes the most sense. And you can do this with your leadership teams or others on your teams to think through too. You know, the benefit of having common language, like any leadership frame, is it just makes sure that everybody's talking about the same thing. So this is an example of a tool that can be used in that way. Other thoughts, questions, wonderings? And I'm going to paste an image of Noster's model too, if you haven't seen it.
I'll just comment that, I mean, I think that's interesting, Brian, that your group talked about using this on the front end and in terms of like planning, because I think I tend to use it on the back end. So similar to what we did today, looking at the roles and relationships and thinking about where I operate most frequently and, you know, why something isn't working the way that I want it to work, why I'm not getting traction for an idea, or why a relationship was damaged that I didn't intend to damage, and kind of using it as a hindsight tool. So I think that I find that really interesting that you're thinking about using it on the front end in a planning way.
Yeah, Fred and Megan, I was just going to say too, I think We just actually had our administrative retreat this past week, and we worked on decision making, which really reminds me there's a lot of connections here. And we had a very lengthy facilitated discussion with a professional about who makes the decisions and why, and how much we hold on to decisions because it's a part of the culture too, right? So I can make all of the changes and write all the things down in the world, but if the administrators around me or that are supervising me do not have that same frame of mind, if I'm trying to get away from making all the intensive decisions, but it's a part of the culture, you know, that you are heavily involved, it makes it tough. So it's really a great, going back to what Brian was saying, like it's a really great opportunity for your team to talk about how decisions are made, and then, you know, what are the benefits of the way that we run our organization versus how could we improve our efficiency, and quite frankly, sometimes empower other people, maybe teacher leaders, et cetera, that we don't necessarily tap into because we think we've got to do it all.
Michelle, I'll just add that you made me think a little bit about what I just posted in the chat. I think that we, personality-wise and based on how our careers have shaped up to the current point, we tend to find ourselves like predisposed to leading through one of those quadrants. Not that we always spend all the time there, but we may be, just based on any number of reasons, regularly a pusher or regularly a nudger. And so part of the hope is that we start to shift ourselves to almost being like right in the center of that four frame and utilizing all four so that they match the situation that we're in and the people who we're working with, right? Because some people will always be more open to being nudged than being pushed, right? And so part of an interaction is it's not just about you, right? And what you're predisposed to. You also have to recognize the person or people who are invested in whatever the situation is along with you. And that's, again, a good frame. And there are so many great leadership frames out there, but this is a good one too, to helping bring that common thought together so you can dissect situations using the same language. Any final thoughts or ideas before we turn it over to our friends at SAANYS and New York State ASCD?
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for participating today, and especially thank Fred and Megan. The conversations are very fruitful. It's a good start to rethinking some of the work that we often take for granted, but with the proper tools can be so much more effective than we even begin to imagine or dream. So again, thank you both, Fred and Megan. As I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in copies of ebooks for this series, they come in PDF format, which makes them very usable. They're the same pagination as the softcover books that would be available. You can just email me at the email address you see on your screen, newyorkstateascd.director@gmail.com. Also, I want to remind everyone that our third and final session is next week, and that's with Nancy Frye, and it will focus on her book that she's written with Doug Fisher and several others, Your Students, My Students, Our Students, Rethinking Equitable and Inclusive Classrooms. And it helps us in our understanding of not only that need, but it applies to all students. So just wanted to make sure that you all remember that that session's coming up next week. Plus, SAANYS, as soon as the videos are edited, they'll be posting them and you'll be getting a link in your email. So with that, I turn it over to Michelle.
Okay, thank you, Eric, and thank you, Fred and Megan. Before you all leave today, I just wanted to share with you a couple other things that SAANYS is doing. I want to remind everyone. First, we have a great program coming up, our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Cohort. And this is a year-long immersive experience with Dr. Laval Brown, who you may have heard of. He really is a leader in this area. And that's going to kick off in October. So we urge you to sign up and have your team sign up and, work on this together throughout the school year. And our other program we have is our annual conference is back, and we're very excited about that with keynoter Dominique Smith, who is the author of Leading the Rebound and many other things, along with Nancy Frye and Douglas Fisher co-wrote that book. So he's going to have some great ideas on how we all bounce back. And then Dr. Romy Mushtag will be with us too to talk about stress, work stress, life balance, and those very important topics. So a good balance of presenters. So we hope you join us for the SAANYS annual conference, and more information on that is all available on our website. And I think with that, we're done for the day. So everybody have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.